I want to take the opportunity to start this year off with a retrospective on a game that mostly flew under the radar, and that's Psychonauts 2 from Double Fine Productions. Before you come after me, let me explain. As of the recording of this video, the game was last reported to have sold a bit under 2 million copies, which by today's standards for a first-party outing from a major publisher/console manufacturer, this is a commercial failure. But what you may fail to consider is the gaming climate around the time of release, as well as its development cycle. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe the video, grab a drink and some popcorn, sit back and relax. Psychonauts 2 came out in 2021. That's now 4 years ago. So there was no Astrobot, there was no Indiana Jones, there was no Super Mario Wonder, there was no Sonic Frontiers, no Pikmin 4, no Hogwarts Legacy, no Elden Ring, no Hi-Fi Rush, and most importantly, no Hello Kitty Island Adventure. My point clearly is that it was a different time for owners of the, at the time, next-gen consoles. PC components were also going through COVID pricing, and consumers and distributors were dealing with scalpers. Simultaneously, Xbox and Sony were dealing with their own shortages for their, at the time, new consoles. While there were clearly shortages in hardware, this did not stop the inevitable hype cycle that came with routine marketing. Remember the in-depth breakdowns of the SSD speed comparisons between the PS5 and the Xbox consoles? Enthusiasts will remember the ridiculous comparisons of game after game. But most casual onlookers will probably tell you that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was the game to show off this new tech inside the PS5. You could jump into rifts, instantly load into the new world, and back again, basically in the blink of an eye, thanks to this new state-of-the-art game and technology that was also using ray tracing on consoles, which, again, at the time, there were much less options than there are now. So while the PS5 had this brand new AAA banger to show off with all these flashy new features, Xbox had the admittedly awesome Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite. 2021 Halo Infinite to be specific, not Halo Infinite as it is today. Two games that could not be farther apart in terms of quality on their respective launches. But Tim Schafer and Double Fine Productions were also able to complete a 15-year development hell/funding cycle and were finally able to put out Psychonauts 2. So why do I bring all this up? Because prior to their acquisition by Xbox and Microsoft, Double Fine were on the verge of bankruptcy. It's actually a really interesting story in its own right if you want to look into it more, but it's not the focus of this video. Anyway, Psychonauts 2 comes out, and you have this game that has this very stylized, cartoony-esque platformer with almost a Tim Burton-esque style of physical humor and quirky characters. Based on initial impressions alone, this game is not for everyone. The first game, which released 20 years ago... Wait, 20 years? Oh my god. If you played the first game, your back hurts now. And probably your knees. And you probably take Lexapro. Anyway, if you did play the first game during the Great Depression, you may remember that the game developed a small but dedicated following during an era where mascot platformers were much more common than they are now. But if you scratch beyond surface level, you see that there is a very good platforming game there, and is not afraid to highlight some very mature tones in its narrative. Speaking about a narrative in a stylized platformer type game doesn't really sound like it makes sense, but if we fast forward to the modern day and we can see how the movie Inside Out 2 was able to visualize the sensation of having a panic attack so well, I feel that Psychonauts did it in its own way in video game form. Psychonauts 2 has its own little manifestations of panic attacks. They appear as these short creatures that dart around uncontrollably, so it's more than just the character designs that are clever. The main standout aspect of Psychonauts 2 is without a doubt how it incorporates its main themes into its level design. Psychonauts 2's world building sets it apart. Imagine a world where your deepest fears, your insecurities, and your past traumas take shape in a mind-bending landscape. Now imagine exploring those worlds as a psychic secret agent in training, using a mix of acrobatics and supernatural powers. That's the genius of Psychonauts 2. It's one of the most creative and underappreciated platforms of the last decade, in my opinion. Every single level in Psychonauts 2 feels like stepping into someone's subconscious, because that's literally what you're doing. Each mental world is a tangible, explorable representation of a character's emotions, trauma, or psychological struggles, and no two minds are ever alike. For example, you have this hospital-turned-casino level where medical decisions are literal gambles. The doctors are dressed as high rollers. The patients are chips on a roulette table, and life-saving surgery hinges on the spin of a wheel. It's this creative way of showcasing reckless decision-making and addiction that makes this level stick in your mind. Later on, you have a cooking game show segment where the contestants' fear of public judgment takes form as these massive, overbearing judges with these really terrifying grins and smiles. It's awful. Not only is it a fun level, but it's a really perfect metaphor in my eyes for performance anxiety. I'll give you one more example. There's another level where you have an entire psychedelic rock concert inside a musician's mind, complete with all these neon lit platforms and floating eyeballs that sing to you. There's also mechanics that sync with the beat of a music. It's visually breathtaking. It makes it so unique in a way that's hard to describe. Psychonauts 2 doesn't just use creative levels for the sake of fun. It actually ties them into deep personal struggles and makes each one feel like a mini character study. I won't go too much into the combat because the only reasonable comparison is to its first iteration, which came out, as I said, 20 freaking years ago. That being said, the combat in Psychonauts 2 was a massive step up from the original game. Instead of just melee attacks, you get fully integrated psi powers, which makes the battles feel more dynamic and strategic in a way. What's really nice is that you actually get these powers that help you slow down combat. So you get this time bubble attack, and it helps you to deal with things like those panic attacks I mentioned earlier. Because of the way that these enemies move around, the time bubble is perfect to deal with that. What you'll probably notice as you go through the game is that each enemy type is actually designed with a psychological theme, and it makes them feel like more than just obstacles. For example, you have Regret, which are these winged, heavy enemies that drop heavy-weighted baggage onto Raz, literally dragging you down with regret. There's also Enablers that boost others' powers while shouting toxic positivity, forcing you to take them out first. And then you have Bad Moods, which are these floating clouds of negativity that can only be attacked once you locate their source, emphasizing the real-world idea that bad moods often stem from deeper issues. It's so rare for a platformer to put this much thought into enemy design, and most games just throw in generic goons, but Psychonauts 2 makes every enemy encounter feel meaningful. And this goes on to the next section, which is perhaps Psychonauts 2's most important achievement is in how it tackles mental health in an honest, non-stigmatizing way. Tim Schafer and the team at Double Fine worked with mental health professionals to ensure this level of authenticity comes through as you're playing the game. Like, some of the major themes that are clearly explored are anxiety, then you also have addiction and reckless behavior, and that casino-themed hospital level, right, which we were talking about, that symbolizes poor medical decisions are often driven by greed. And then you have self-doubt and imposter syndrome, which is actually something that Raz constantly goes through himself throughout the game, is that he's not a real psychonaut. And this mirrors common fears that people often get about just not being good enough. Again, I find this level of care in gaming to be so rare, especially in a platformer of all things, which is usually a focus on fun first and themes second. And Psychonauts 2 uses gameplay to tell more personal stories, making it a more introspective experience than I would have thought going into it. In terms of the game itself, like I said, the game tackles those adult themes and integrates them into the story. The game puts you in control of Raz, a young psychic agent who can enter people's minds and use various psychic and acrobatic abilities. The gameplay seamlessly blends platforming, combat, and exploration across both real-time environments and surreal mental landscapes. Each mental world is uniquely themed around the character whose mind you're exploring, featuring those distinct visual styles and gameplay challenges that we've been talking about. The game's hub world, the Mother Lobe, serves as a central location from which players can access various missions and side activities. While not an open world, it offers enough freedom to explore at your own pace without overwhelming the player with too many simultaneous objectives. This is a great thing in my opinion, especially in the era of open world bloat that we've been getting. We finally seem to be just coming out of the open world boom that devs seem to follow after the success of The Witcher 3. Psychonauts 2 is also, while it doesn't boast ray tracing or any mind-blowing next-gen features, Psychonauts 2 is visually and artistically stunning with tons of varied environments that make each of those mental worlds feel distinct and memorable. We were talking before about how the PS5 and Ratchet & Clank would show off the rift jumping as the tech demo for the PS5, right? Well, meanwhile, on lowly Unreal Engine 4, Psychonauts 2, while not doing things quite like Rift Apart, was able to pull off really visually stunning levels and transitions in its own right through clever tricks. I remember playing through Rift Apart. I really love Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. I remember playing through Psychonauts 2. I can honestly tell you, I remember more levels from Psychonauts 2 because of how visually impactful and memorable they were, and also the impact that they had on the story and the characters that Double Fine Productions has brought to life here. While being critically acclaimed by users and reviewers alike, the game, as I mentioned earlier, did not shoot to the top of the charts. The game still sits at a last reported sold of 1.7 million copies. The game is on Game Pass, it's on Steam, it runs on Steam Deck. It's a fantastic game that deserves more love, and I really truly believe that it's a game that has gone underappreciated for what it does through the medium of a video game. by integrating its themes and messaging in the form of level design that requires no dialogue for me as the player to understand what it's trying to tell me is a feat that more developers should aspire to accomplish. I do not like when developers don't assume intelligence on the gamer's part. Going back to the original point of the title of the video, is Psychonauts 2 an underappreciated masterpiece? Despite being nominated for multiple Game Awards in 2021, Psychonauts won almost nothing, which was due to a few factors. For one thing, it released in an absolutely stacked year with It Takes Two and Resident Evil Village, even had Metroid Dread in there. As I mentioned, Psychonauts 2 also didn't develop the largest commercial market, and it has a generally smaller audience appeal as a result compared to other mainstream franchises. There was also a significantly smaller marketing push than I would argue for its contemporaries. However, I feel that its impact on platformers has been undeniable, and it proves that platformers can be more than just action. They can be narrative-driven and deeply personal. In closing, it's important to remember Psychonauts 2. It may not have taken home the top prize, but it left a lasting mark on the industry, proving that platformers can be innovative, emotionally impactful, and incredibly fun. And I feel that if you haven't played Psychonauts 2, now is the perfect time to dive in. It runs great on all consoles, it runs well on PC, and it even runs on the Steam Deck, as you've seen throughout this video. So let me know what you think. Did Psychonauts 2 deserve more recognition? Drop a comment down below, I'd love to have a chat with you. And if you enjoyed this retrospective or found it informative, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the best games out there. Make sure to hit that bell for allegedly instant notifications on when the next video drops. Until next time, this is Ambro bringing you news on the games that matter. Peace out.